Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I am super excited to have you here today because we are unpacking what is arguably one of the most bizarre and fascinating events of the 20th century, the Great Los Angeles Air Raid of 1942. But listen, we aren't just going to dust off old military records today. As an impartial investigator, I'm going to walk you through a highly unconventional, deeply esoteric analysis of this event straight from our source material. We're actually going to examine this famous historical mystery through a Vedic astrological lens. Now, our goal here isn't to prove or disprove anything, but to completely decode this source document and see how it frames this anomaly. Because as you'll see, it doesn't view it as an attack at all, but as something functioning entirely outside our normal understanding of physics.
Okay, let's dive right into this. 1400. Just let that number sink in for a second. On the night of February 24th, into the early hours of the 25th, 1942, the United States military fired over 1,400 heavy anti-aircraft artillery rounds into the sky over Los Angeles. They were firing at a massive, seemingly immobile object just suspended up there in the air. Searchlights were completely locked onto it. The entire city was in a total blackout. And yet, after absorbing a relentless barrage of high-explosive artillery, this object suffered absolutely zero effect. Nothing. It literally just absorbed the fire and eventually vanished.
Section 1. The 1942 Mystery.
So, we really need to establish just how physically impossible this event was, according to standard military understanding. I mean, eyewitnesses described this huge, pale orange object just hanging in the night sky. Anti-aircraft shells were exploding right on top of it, all around it, directly beneath it. By all known laws of physics and warfare, whatever was up there should have been totally obliterated, or at the very least, crashed to the ground in burning pieces. But instead, nothing happened. Our source text treats this massive physical impossibility as the ultimate forensic mystery. It asks, well, if it wasn't a physical aircraft, what exactly were they shooting at? And that brings us to this incredibly powerful quote directly from the analysis we're unpacking. The author calls it an anomalous manifestation, an extradimensional interference. This right here is the central premise of our source material. They're arguing that the military wasn't firing at a secret Japanese bomber, and no, not a physical alien ship in either. Instead, they suggest the object was a literal tear in the fabric of reality, an extra-dimensional anomaly that somehow bled into our visual spectrum. It's a complete paradigm shift, moving us away from a wartime threat and straight into a cosmic event.
Moving on to Section 2, the Vedic astrological lens.
So, the crucial point here is that to understand this bizarre interference, our source doesn't use radar or ballistics. Instead, it uses the Vedic astrological chart for February 24th and 25th, 1942, treating it as a highly advanced technological forensic tool. You kind of have to think of this Vedic chart not as your daily horoscope, but as a diagnostic map of the specific energetic conditions of that exact night. Let's decode this map really quickly. First up, we have the Sun in Aquarius. In this system, Aquarius amplifies the non-human, the totally unconventional, and specifically anomalies in the sky. Next, we look at Saturn in Taurus, specifically in the lunar mansion of Rohini. Saturn represents solid geometric structures, while Rohini governs visible manifestations. And finally, we have Ketu in Leo, in the mansion of Maga. Ketu represents invisibility, intangibility, and multidimensionality. Hold on to these definitions, guys, because they are literally the building blocks of this entire mystery. Now, what's really fascinating is how these abstract astrological concepts perfectly align with the actual physical eyewitness accounts from 1942. The source identifies this overarching Ketu-Saturn-Rahu pattern that was dominating the sky that night. According to Vedic tradition, this specific combination produces phenomena that are silent, non-linear, and incredibly hard to identify. But crucially, they're perceived as a massive threat by observers, even though they remain physically unassailable. When you compare those traits to the military reports of a massive, silent, indestructible object, wow, the parallel the source draws is absolutely striking.
Let's move to Section 3, the axis of the invisible, and see how this builds. Let's break down the specific astrological mechanics that supposedly made this object entirely bulletproof. The source material argues that the night was dominated by an axis of tension between two opposing celestial forces. I like to think of this as the equation metaphor. Here is how it works. Step 1. You have Saturn and Taurus. As we just learned, this provides the appearance of a solid, visible, geometric structure. Step 2. You add Ketu and Leo to the mix. Ketu acts to strip away the physical body, bringing in an intangible, extra-dimensional quality. So, Step 3 is the result. When you combine the visible form of Saturn with the utter emptiness of Ketu, what do you get? You get a visible, structured ghost ship. It has a shape, it reflects the military's searchlights, it looks incredibly real. but there is absolutely no dense matter there to be destroyed by an artillery shell.
Massive, suspended, immobile, undamageable. I want you to really just look at those 4 words for a second. We're repeating them here because this is the absolute core of the anomaly. The Saturn-Ketu equation perfectly, mathematically explains, at least from the esoteric perspective of our source, why hundreds of terrified soldiers on the ground could look up, clearly see a target, fire absolutely everything they had at it, and then just watch the explosions pass harmlessly right through it.
Which brings us to Section 4, Panic and Distortion.
Okay, let's pivot for a minute. We've talked a lot about the mysterious objects suspended in the sky, but what about the chaotic, terrified human reaction down on the ground? Well, the source material argues that the earthly panic wasn't just a natural reaction to the object, it was actively being driven by specific lunar and planetary placements known to warp human psychology. On that night, the moon was positioned in a lunar mansion known as Ardra. Now, Ardra is ruled by Rudra, a deity literally known as the Destroyer. According to the text, Ardra governs sudden, intense emotional impacts and is heavily associated with luminous atmospheric phenomena. It is considered a literal portal between the physical and subtle realms. So, while the skies over LA were filled with blaring air raid sirens, frantic searchlights, and explosions, the source suggests that the moon in Ardra was acting as a giant cosmic amplifier for sudden collective dread and atmospheric chaos.
Furthermore, we have to look at the placement of Rahu, which was hanging out in Shatabisha. Now, while Shatabisha translates to 100 healers, its darker shadow side represents veils, deep mysteries, illusions, and profound perceptual distortion. The source material points directly to this placement to explain the absolute collective psychosis of the military that night. Because of this intense perceptual distortion, the anti-aircraft smoke created by their very own guns, illuminated by their very own searchlights, was mistakenly perceived as entirely new swarms of enemy aircraft, which of course led to even more frantic blind firing up into the dark. It was a massive feedback loop of illusion.
Section 5, the extradimensional interference.
All right, it's time to bring all this esoteric forensic evidence together. As investigators of this source text today, we've looked at the physical impossibility of the event, the geometry of the planets creating a literal ghost ship, and the psychological placements that induced mass panic. Let's synthesize exactly what the text believes actually happened. And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate divide here. On one side, from the 1942 military perspective, they saw a physical enemy aircraft. They saw a material threat to the nation, something that should be subject to ballistics and gravity. But from the Vedic perspective drawn from our source, this was an extra-dimensional interference. Ancient texts actually refer to these kinds of phenomena as Gandharva Nagara, a celestial city, or a high-level optical illusion. It was never a machine of war, it was an apparition, manifesting in a tense, highly charged atmosphere.
So, to summarize the exact sequence of this cosmic event as outlined by our source, we have 4 distinct steps layering together perfectly. Number 1, an extra-dimensional interference was generated, linked directly to Ketu. Number 2, this interference was rendered visible as an artificial light field or geometric shape thanks to Saturn. Number 3, the human perception of this light field was completely warped and amplified by a collective psychosis governed by Rahu. And finally, number 4, because this all occurred just weeks after Pearl Harbor, with the moon in the chaotic mansion of Ardra, this optical anomaly was instantly perceived as a deadly wartime threat. It was, basically, the perfect esoteric storm. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative question proposed by the framework of our source material. What if history was just a cosmic illusion? Think about it. If an entire major city, backed by the full might of the United States military, could spend hours fighting a desperate, explosive battle against a completely intangible, extra-dimensional phantom, well, what else in our recorded history might not be exactly as solid as we think? It really forces us to question the multidimensional nature of reality itself, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the Vedic decoding of the 1942 Los Angeles anomaly. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.